Hey Pokemon Masters, Berkeeper Toby here, and Valentine's Day is coming up. Maybe you're with someone, maybe you're not. Happy Valentine's Day either way. And actually, if you do find yourself single, I made a video about being single over on my vlogging channel, which I will leave a link to at the top of the description, but that's not why you're here. You're here for Pokemon. And historically, my videos about romance in Pokemon, more specifically shipping, have done reasonably well on the channel. Shipping is a fascinating part of the community to me because it's like theorizing, but just around this one specific subject of which characters do you think are gonna fall in love? Of course, I've done videos on Amourshipping, which was a very popular ship back in the X and Y's days, about Ash and Serena from the show. Today's video, just as a special for Valentine's Day, is actually gonna be about a Pokemon ship that's incredibly old, that has recently resurfaced thanks to more evidence popping up in Pokemon Sun and Moon, and that is called Nameless shipping. And whatever you think of this pairing, or whatever you think of shipping in terms of Pokemon theories and that kind of thing, I ask only for your respect in the comments below. So, let's get into it. Nameless shipping is the romantic pairing of the player character from the Generation 1 games and your rival, Blue. Of course, it's called nameless shipping because they can be any name. They can be red, or green, or blue, or buttface. Cute little pet name. But the quote-unquote canon name for these characters are red and blue, and canonically red tends to be a boy. However, that gets a little bit more complicated when we look at the remakes. I'll talk about that in a moment. But the reason it's important to address canons first off is when you're talking about player characters in Pokemon, canon is kind of a very loose term because any name is the canon name. And with some player characters, the choices that you make completely change your backstory. For example, May and Brandon are both canonical characters in the Pokemon world, but which one is Norman's child and which one is Professor Birch's child? That is entirely up to you, the player, to make the decision about. And speaking of picking an in-game gender, Red, who shows up in Pokemon Sun and Moon, could just as easily be Leaf from the Generation 1 remake. So it's really entirely up to you how you view this ship. The true ship isn't really between Red and Blue or Leaf and Blue, it's between the player character and Blue, your rival. So it's really up to you how you view this shape. I think some people see Red as the more canonical version of the player character just because he reappears in later games, for example in Gold and Silver, on the top of Mount Silver, or in the Black and White World Tournament, and now in Sun and Moon, and he appears as Red and not as Leaf. And their manga counterparts, Red and Leaf, are two separate characters, but then again, so are all of the different player characters. Even though, like I said earlier on with May and Brandon, they can take on the same role in the game. So, as I say, it's all up to you. Point is, we're looking at these two characters here that are interchangeable. So what's the evidence that there's some kind of romantic relationship between the player character and your rival? Stereotypically, your rival Buttface is just generally kinda rude to you. Smell you later, loser. You're not gonna be as great as me. These are the attitudes and sentiments of your rival in the Generation 1 games. That said, and one of the reasons shipping is such a controversial topic when it comes to Pokemon, is because a lot of these characters are pretty young, and that kind of playful rudeness is kind of what you'd expect from a younger person who doesn't necessarily know how to express their feelings properly. It's a very stereotypical kid thing to do. People also like this pairing because both characters have similar ambitions, trying to complete the Pokedex and become the greatest Pokemon trainer. But also, let's face it, their relationship is an intense one that stretches back from way before the games even start. You grew up next door to this person, so it's kind of like, oh, the whole neighbor dynamic. And this is something that again has been referenced in other Pokemon shippings. For example, Brandon and May, where you've got these two technically interchangeable characters who live next door to each other, who are about the same age. I'm pretty sure my mum made a comment about it back when she played Omega Ruby.
Should go over and introduce yourself.
Your new neighbour?
We have a son just about the same age as you. Oh, here we go.
No, it's not. They're like 11. It's not, well, it could be, I don't know.
But I think for a lot of people, some of the best evidence for this ship goes way back to the TV show. And I know, oh my goodness, we're crossing canons, the TV show is just a parallel set of events to the events that happen in the game. And so while no, certainly we can't take direct evidence, we can have a look at that story and the way it plays out because the stories do share a lot of similarities, especially in the dynamics between trainers. And there is a very common shipping called Pallet shipping between Ash and his rival Gary, who are the TV show counterparts of these characters. Well, hey, Ashy boy. There are a number of key moments from the show that support Pallet shipping. There's actually a whole Bulbapedia article page about it. I think maybe one of the ones worth highlighting more is that Brock in the show has a certain reaction to whenever the name of Professor Ivy is mentioned. Brock goes blue and completely shuts down because he doesn't want to talk about his rejected love from her. And in one of the episodes, Ash does the exact same thing when Gary's name is mentioned. Pretty interesting. Apparently there are even more hints in the Japanese original dub that were cut out in the English version, but anyway, that's just that. The point is, if the characters do share those traits with their video game counterparts, then that could be used as evidence for a potential shipping between the player character and Blue. Like I say though, shipping is a pretty controversial one, even when it came to the more mainstream ships. For example, in the show, Ash and Misty, or Ash and Serena. And in fact, Veronica Taylor, the voice actress for Ash Ketchum, who has also lent her voice to the outro of my videos, has said publicly that she doesn't think that Ash is really that interested in Misty, because at that age, he's more interested in just catching Pokemon. In order to truly tell, we'd need to see these characters as being older, and in the case of Ash and Gary, or rather their video game counterparts, we do now see them as older. And this is why apparently the internet seems to be more interested in this ship lately, is because Red and Blue appear in Pokemon Sun and Moon as older versions of themselves. And the speculation is that the reason they are in Alola is because they're on their honeymoon. That's not my theory, that's someone else's. But it's out there on the internet and people feel very passionately about it, and I can kind of see why. For example, in the past times where we've seen the relationships between Red, Leaf, and Blue, there has been that childlike rudeness. Now there appears to be mutual admiration between the two characters. That rudeness appears very toned down in the dialogue of Sun and Moon, but again, it's all very speculative. And you really do have to pick and choose evidence from every single canon. Again, looking at the manga canon, for example, in the Pokemon Adventures manga, for example, like I said earlier, some of the player characters are separated, and Leaf is separated from Red as two separate characters. And Leaf does show an interest in Blue, calling him cute. There's a bunch of other things, there's a whole group of different Bulbapedia articles you can check out on shipping. But you know, this is just a fun Valentine's special video about shipping. I don't in particular support any one ship in the Pokemon world. Again, I'm more obsessed with just catching Pokemon. That said, maybe you're into shipping, maybe you're not. Let me know your thoughts respectfully and kindly in the comments below. What do you think of this ship? Also, as a kind of sub-question to you, do you think if gender options were available in the Generation 1 games, we would have seen Leaf on the top of Mount Silver as well as Red? Maybe Leaf would be appearing in Alola at the Battle Tree? I'd love to know what you think about that, and how they would work that dynamic in. I think that could be really cool. Anyway, I just feel like flying away now, so soar high, Pokemon Masters, and if you want to check out my video on relationships from my vlogging channel, I'll leave a link to that on screen right now. A special thank you to my Patreons of the month, especially my big Patreons of the month, Jon D Gottlitch and Joey Pals. Thank you.
This is Ash Ketchum. You just watched a video by Birdkeeper Toby. That makes you a Pokemon Master.